You've seen it before 1,000 times. The hero of the day is in a desperate power struggle against someone who's got significantly more resources and significantly more power, and is seemingly only motivated by greed. The evil businessman is a classic villain archetype, one of the most recognizable in all of fiction. You can find these characters all over the place. Lex Luthor from DC, Goldfinger from James Bond, and even Ian Hawke from the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies. After years of seeing this character come up time and time again in novels, TV shows, movies, video games, I can only really come to one conclusion. These guys really suck at business.
I declare bankruptcy!
I'm not trying to say that all evil businessman characters in fiction are bad characters. Far from it. Many are iconic in their own right. What I am trying to say is that in a realistic and fair business environment, many of these characters would be broke faster than someone who treats their Funko Pops like a real monetary asset. Which I actually think has the ability to heighten the evil businessman's evil. I mean, if you can't win in a fair game, rigging it is a pretty evil thing to do. There are many ways that a character can make money, both ethical and unethical. It's just funny to me that many fictional businessmen, the ones we are supposed to be rooting against, are actually pretty bad at making money, regardless of the ethics of the situation. Nowhere do I think this concept can be better explained than in Brandon Sanderson's Cosme. As you can see, I am in my Truthwatcher corner chair, which means that we are once again digging into the vast, interconnected universe of one nerdy BYU professor.
Once more! Unto the breach! Dear friends, once more, or close them all up with our English dead!
While I think my reasoning can be applied to a lot, or even most, fictional businessmen, the Cosmere offers a great microcosm of economics that I can use as examples. It also, funnily enough, contains a very good variety of the opposite. Good people who are actually pretty dang good at making money. So, let's break down the business plans of the Cosmere's wealthiest here in Truthwatcher Corner. Okay, before we go any further, we should probably iron out a few terms. What does it actually mean to be good at business? I'm sure that during that whole intro, I had plenty of people thinking, what do you mean bad at business? I mean, a fictional businessman just needs to be making money, right? And for the most part, you'd be right. But there's a lot more to making money than just making money. Just so we're all on the same page, let me try and explain what criteria that I will be ranking these moneymakers on. And since we're talking about corporate policy, I decided to come up with a catchy and easy to remember acronym. BIM! Building Increased Money, or I don't know, something more clever than that. To break it down further, I've got 3 key attributes that I think make a really good business. These being beneficial, industrious, and maintainable. I know reducing something as complex as economics and business management to 3 things is extremely reductive, but I mean, come on. This is a YouTube video about magic fantasy novels, so I'm going to have to simplify a few things. Beneficial. This is definitely the easiest to understand. Any good business has to be engaged in an action that is beneficial to the people running it, i.e., it's got to make money. I probably don't need to spend too much time on this, as it's one of the things that even most of the evil businessmen, both in Cosmere and general fiction and also general life, are pretty good at. But it should be mentioned. A business has to make money, and if it's not doing that, it's pretty bad. Now that isn't to say that a business that has fallen on hard times is inherently being run poorly. I mean, there are plenty of outside factors that might influence the health of a business. But as a general rule, if you're not bringing in the dough, you ain't doing your job. Industrious. Industrious is probably a bit harder to explain. You see, businesses have to be constantly doing something, and they have to be doing these things better than other people. Competition is the soul of business. In a free and fair economy, a company that is able to provide the best service for the best price will survive. The person who cannot handle someone competing with him will likely not succeed. One needs to be able to constantly innovate upon your chosen field, constantly building and improving in as many ways as possible. Many fictional businessmen seek to just wipe out the competition. Now, having a monopoly is a surefire way to bring in money, but it's also kind of hard for me to say that you're really good at something if you're the only one who's allowed to do it. I mean, like, sure, I could confiscate every single copy of Pokemon in the entire world, and then call myself the greatest Pokemon trainer in the world. But would that even be a real achievement at that point? I'd say no. To put it simply, a good businessman is someone who is capable of making money without resorting to outside forces to rig the game in their favor. Maintainable. Our final criteria is, how maintainable is this business? How sustainable are our profits? And by sustainability, I'm not talking about environmental sustainability, though that actually can be a factor depending on the industry at play. I'm talking about, how does this business expect to maintain any profits it's going to be bringing in on the long term? In real life, tons of people have made it rich by coming up with one good solid idea, but failed to deliver on anything past that, and then faded into obscurity. This is actually the death knell of many video game sequels. Just to give you a real life example, look at Duke Nukem Forever, or Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. The first games in these franchises were extremely profitable, but the companies behind them failed to maintain the quality of their merchandise, and now the series are effectively dead. When it comes to fictional business, any money-making scheme that falls apart in the long term is a pretty good signifier of a bad business model. Now, this one can also be a little bit tricky to verify. People have the ability to adapt to their situation, so just because someone is pursuing a short-term monetary gain doesn't mean they can't pivot down the line into other more profitable ventures. Some actually do this in real time, and I'll point them out as we go. I'm mostly trying to get you to think about the long term of an evil scheme by someone supposedly motivated by monetary gain. It's kind of hard to call someone good at making money when the only thing necessary for their whole evil empire to crumble is time. Now, with that lengthy preamble out of the way, let's jump into our Cosmere examples. I'll be taking these world by world and story by story. I'll include time codes below, so if there's a particular book or series that you haven't read yet, feel free to skip right over. I'll also not only be highlighting the bad businessmen who are bad at business, I will also be highlighting heroic characters who are really good at making money. Also, this isn't a definitive list. There's undoubtedly some merchant or noble character that I'm forgetting. And I'll even tell you right now, there are whole books and series that I'm deliberately leaving out. Because I learned from my last Cosmere video that I only have so much time in the day. I'm really just trying to use the Cosmere to prove a point about fictional business, not necessarily do a whole documentary on all fictional economics in this place. So, with all that said, let's get to world hopping.
Okay then.
Yeah.
I'll just...
Nope.
Here I go.
You should not.
Through the spooky portal.
Let's begin on the world of wind and storms, the flagship planet of the Cosmere, Roshar. Amongst the creme and the crabs, we can find a decent variety of money-making enterprises. But funnily enough, this one's going to be hard to categorize. You see, many of the wealthy on Roshar are also noblemen, which means their wealth comes, at least in part, due to taxes and the threat of state force. which is kind of the exact opposite of free enterprise. To make this a bit fair though, I will try and grade any noble characters in this video on a little bit of a curve. Let's start with Torlin Rochon. When I was doing research for this video, I discovered that this man's name is Torlin. Didn't know that when I started this, and now I don't know what to do with that information. Looking at the specific business side of this man's ventures, he's not doing well. As of 1172, the start of the actual main events of the series, Rochon is nearly destitute, at least grading on the scale of light eyes of his ranks. He has been reduced to living in a tiny backwater town. He has next to no disposable income, and he's forced into an industry he doesn't even know, going from a silversmith to a farmer. How did he get here? By being pretty bad at business.
Why? Because I'm all out of money!
Rochon was actually doing pretty well at one point in time. He owned multiple silversmith shops, which is a very solid industry. While Rochard doesn't use silver and gold as currency, it's still a valuable metal, and his multiple shops shows he was doing quite well in terms of profits. It's also a fairly sustainable industry, because the value of silver is really never going to be zero. Yet, Rochon fails because he can't handle competition. Instead of accepting that there was one single competitor in all of Kolinar, Rochon decided to try and rig the game and force his rival out of business, in what is also a highly illegal manner. Rochon had Moash's grandparents arrested without charge, and even if that wasn't an immoral thing to do, it's explicitly stated in the text that it's also a highly illegal thing to do. Rochon was only saved from harsher legal consequences by political pressure. Rochon is a bad businessman because he took what was quite literally a thriving business and he burned it to the ground to try and force out one small independent competitor who was not remotely a threat to his bottom line. On the flip side, Rochard is home to one of the single greatest and most morally solid businessmen in the entire franchise, the Phelan Trade Master, Stim. This man is so gosh dang great at making money and is also really freaking cool about it. Stim's primary industry is merchant caravans, which is essentially shipping and receiving, an industry that will quite literally never go away, thus making it radically sustainable. It's also a highly adaptable industry. If Stim notices that, say, his chickens aren't making the same money they used to, he can pivot pretty easily into other fine-shin products. He also handles competition really well. He doesn't stop anyone from attempting to acquire the same goods that he is, he's just doing it better. Only Stim actually bothered to master the trading strategies of everyone he interacts with. His caravans are making a lot of money, and they're doing so consistently, and he's doing it without worrying about competition because he knows he can outcompete them fairly. On top of all of this, he's also just a generally nice guy. He doesn't try and screw his customers, and he's somewhere between a grandfather and father to Rissyn. I mean, he gifts the woman an entire ship purely out of the kindness of his heart. I'll also briefly mention Rissyn. We don't get to see much of her doing any trading, but she clearly has the instincts for business, and she picks up pretty quickly on how to properly trade with the Shin, and she understands the importance of building positive relationships with her customers through commerce. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum is Toril Sabius. Now, I will admit, I'm kind of stretching the businessman definition here, but wealth is a major motivating factor for this character. So, while we're at it, why don't we take a look at the man's business ventures? It's terrible. It's all terrible. Sabius' primary wealth maker as of the start of the series is warmongering. That is a really bad business for a number of reasons. Maintaining a standing army is extremely expensive, as you need food, armor, weapons, and wages for all your men. You also need to make sure the men survive, as each time one dies, you're going to have to spend a lot of money to replace them. Sadeas is only able to keep up his army because of the Shattered Plains gem hearts and slave labor, neither of which are sustainable resources. According to Shallan, chasm fiends are now an endangered species. When chasm fiends finally go extinct, Sadeas' entire campaign grinds to a halt. He won't be able to feed or pay his men, and I shouldn't need to tell you that ticking off an entire army of violent psychopaths is a very bad idea. Sadeas also has this radical opinion that he can indefinitely get slaves and soldiers from Landon-Core, which is really stupid. Based on Kaladin's description of Sadeas' domestic army, the High Prince has already tapped nearly everything his princedom has to offer in terms of manpower. The whole reason Tien was conscripted and eventually put in a battle that he had no business being in was because Sadeas' army was severely undermanned. It wouldn't be long before Sadeas found himself out of money, out of new recruits, and out of options. Sadeas also isn't particularly competitive. The only thing that has kept him on top of the other High Princes is the fact that they're too proud to band together against him. It's pretty fitting that the very second the Alethi High Princes do unify under the bondsmith Dalinar Kholin, the Sadeas princedom is rendered basically impotent. Honestly, Adolin did Sadeas a bit of a favor. Had he lived, Sadeas would have had to watch his entire empire crumble entirely because of his own poor economic management. Let's get off Roshar and check out the world of Sel. The AonDollar is probably the most versatile magic system in the entire Cosmere, and the implications thereof are far-reaching. But I'm not really concerned with their spell books. I want to look at their pocketbooks. Chief amongst the dregs of Sel's business world is the first king of Erelon, Iadon. This guy is terrible at business. I mean, holy crap, he sucks. For starters, he's not even very profitable. While he apparently has some okay negotiating skills based on that trade deal he made with King Aventio, Iadon is actively hemorrhaging money. As of the events of Elantris, Iadon only has a fortune because he married a woman with a large inheritance, and he only keeps his title because he's counting the kingdom's tax revenue amongst his own personal wealth. Yes, Worm Wolfton IV is actively undermining him and costing him money by attacking his ship with pirate crews, but Iadon is not exactly making it hard for him.
Do what you want, cause a pirate is free. You are a pirate.
Iadon also totally fails in terms of sustainability. As established, he only maintains his wealth by deliberately counting the tax revenue, and embezzlement is not sustainable. Now, while the economy of pre-Riod Elantris is not explained in detail, the Elantrians seem to be pretty okay with general business, generally let people do what they want, handle their own business affairs. I mean, it probably wasn't explicitly laissez-faire, but they seem to lean that way. Post-Riod Elantris, Iadon is forcing the people into being serfs in a feudal state. And that is really bad business. Slavery is terrible, as not only are you committing horrible crimes against humanity, the return on investment is significantly lower than it would be if you just let people be free and then paid them for work. Sereni literally had to explain this concept to Raoden's band of rebels, and guess what? It worked. It made money. Iadon is also not competitive. Forcing people into serfdom is actively squashing potential competition. You can't call yourself good at business if you rig the game to only a select few players. Players that Iodon himself picks, as he can legally remove people's titles. I mean, this guy sucks. In our good column, let's look at literally everyone else except Duke Tillery. By this I mean, let's look at all of the good guys. Royal, Shudan, Lukel, Kian, all these men were independently wealthy on their own merits. Only Kian seemed to struggle with the whole concept of a competitive market, well, with that whole, Driak crush throat thing. But he made his current fortune on his own, and he didn't even have the royal title anymore, and still made it absurdly rich. All of these men make money via merchant ships, which we've already talked about is a fairly sustainable industry. And seeing as they're all making a lot of money, they're doing pretty well. They're just great businessmen, and there's no real bones about it.
Are you out of your head? You'll crack your skull open!
Our final stop today will be at Scadrial, the land of myths and secrets. As it turns out, one of those secrets is actually sound monetary sense. I want to start off Scadrial with one of the best, Wayne Terrasport. Despite starting off the series broker than basically anyone, Wayne ended the series as one of the single richest men in the entire cosmos. How did Wayne make his fortune? By being incredibly gosh dang smart with his money, even though he was trying his hardest to be really terrible with his money. You see, Wayne's initial seed money came from a bounty payout after foiling a high-profile string of robberies. He decided to make nothing but genius financial moves after this fact. Wayne is essentially a venture capitalist. He makes his money by investing in different businesses at the ground level and then reaping the profits when they do well. Based on the many real-world millionaires and billionaires who do this exact same thing, it's clearly a profitable enterprise. Wayne first invented in Sophie Tarxel's inventions, which was a wise move, as Tarxel Electric would be making massive amounts of money off of building and selling those inventions. Wayne would then pivot into investing in the housing market, which was again a pretty genius move, as there was a massive untapped market for low-income housing. And then Wayne decided to, invent professional sports, which I really shouldn't need to tell you is a highly profitable industry. We don't actually get to see how that one paid out, but I think it's going to be safe to assume it did well.
It's there! Hardman! Jackpot! Kansas City!
Venture capital is a risky business, but it is both profitable and sustainable. Its sustainability requires constant upkeep, as you have to stay ahead of the market and find new and worthy things to invest in, but it can be done. Venture capital is also something that can only really exist in a free and fair market environment. It requires you to understand the players in the market and to understand what people would be interested in buying in the first place, so you can, invest properly in those things. Wayne's just naturally incredible at that, at understanding how to make money.
Honor. My client is built differently.
On the opposite end of the spectrum is Phylan Van Drew. You probably don't remember this guy, as he is extraordinarily unmemorable, and also only in one book. Phylan was a member of the Luthadel Assembly under the original reign of then-King Ellen Venture. Phylan was reportedly some sort of merchant, whose wealth is what secured him a spot on the Assembly, representing the merchants of the city. Which makes no sense, because this man is a terrible merchant.
Dude, you know what they say? Mo money, mo problems. That's how it feels, dude.
Mo money, you have $35.
No!
The specifics of Phylan's business dealings aren't explained in detail, What we do know is that he was a dealer of illegal merchandise to the nobles in the days of the Lord Ruler, and then became an open trader after Vin, stabbed that guy. The credit I will give Phylon is that he does seem to have a pretty decent understanding of what will sell, but he sucks at product acquisition. He seems to really only understand active thievery, which is not a sustainable business model. His goods in the Lord Ruler's days were likely stolen, given their illegal nature, and thieving crews in those days really didn't live long. Phylon acquired the active patronage of the nobles to keep his own head off the chopping block. In the days following the Lord Ruler, Phylon actively campaigns for the government to just give him all the food supplies in the city. Now I know Luthadel had a supply problem in those days, so getting his own goods was probably a lot harder, but come on, dude, you aren't even trying. Phylon doesn't just want to rig the game in his favor, he just wants himself declared the winner. Zero competition, zero sustainability, and really zero profits. All around, just a total loser.
It's been just a tremendous loser for this country. Tremendous amounts of money are being lost.
How about a quick one? Steris Harms, who would eventually become Steris Ladrian, showed an incredible natural skill in money management. Her meticulous accounting kept her house flush with cash. It's important to remember that the initial thing that brought Steris to Wax's attention was her money. Her father, Lord Jackstrom Harms, may have been the leader of the house, but he seemed to defer to Steris in most things, which I assume probably meant the family business as well. While it's never actually explained what they made their cash doing, based on Steris' accounting of Wax's house, I think it's safe to assume her family had hands in a wide variety of industries, namely foundries and textile mills, because those were all over the place in Elendil at the time. Both of these are sustainable industries and, as mentioned, had a wide variety of competition in Elendil. Next up on our rapid-fire tour of the Cosmo's best and worst entrepreneurs, let's look at one of the absolute worst of the worst, Straff Venture. Straff may be one of the best villains in the entire Cosmere, because this man is absolutely terrible in ways that absolutely turn my stomach. In addition to the whole murder and other unspeakable crimes, Straff also managed to ravage his house's financial future. The only thing that can really be said for him is that he was profitable. This guy was making money hand over bloody fist in the days of the Lord Ruler. Now, as it turns out, the very second he stops having the patronage of an unkillable demigod dictator, Straff loses basically everything. He does try to salvage it, but he is way too incompetent for that. Straff's main business failure is Atium. House Venture was the largest of the great houses, and was only able to get there because it had exclusive control over day-to-day management of the Pits of Hath-Sin, the Lord Ruler's Atium. Now, Straff didn't just survive by mooching off of a government contract, he put all of his financial eggs in the Atium basket. Now, this might be considered wise policy in the final empire, seeing as the Lord Ruler had ruled for a millennia, a literal 1,000 years. But, taking an outsider's perspective of things, this is highly unstable. One major earthquake could have sealed the pits, and those were becoming more and more common even before Vin killed that guy. The pits were also at threat from both rebellion, as Straff only kept a small garrison there at the Lord Ruler's orders, and from enemy Allomanciers, as Kelsier so incredibly proved. Atium isn't a sustainable resource either. Just a little Allomancy rendered the entire mine useless. Straff was also highly replaceable when it came to running that mine. There was absolutely nothing he was doing at the pits. The Lord Ruler couldn't have just picked someone else to do. Straff's fortune and power wasn't from clever political maneuvering or inspired mercantile deals. It was luck. pure, simple luck. The Lord Ruler arbitrarily picked a house to manage the pits, and Straff managed to hit the jackpot. Calling him good at business is like calling the winner of the lottery good at business. To round out our tour of the worst, let's look at Edward Ladrian. Maximilian Ladrian hated this man, and honestly, so do I. In a flashback to Wax's childhood, Edward is running a bank. Rather poorly. Edward has this incredible plan that he says is going to make the house a ton of money on the long term. And his plan is apparently subprime loans. Edward claims that offering a loan to a man who is unlikely to pay it off at a massively inflated interest rate is a good plan because he can maybe garnish the man's wages eventually. This plan would actively keep the customers of Edward's bank poor, which is not what you want the customers of your bank to be. Banks make money by having people put money into the bank. Edward's plan would ensure that the bank customers had no money to put into the bank. And it would eventually drive away all those customers, and they all realize that if they sign a deal at Edward's bank, they're gonna lose everything. Edward's genius financial scheme is more likely to shutter the doors of his bank before it makes any money. This guy fails at the most basic levels of business management. I hope you enjoyed our little whirlwind run of the Cosmere's 1%. To reiterate my point at the beginning of this video, I don't think it's a bad thing that an evil businessman villain is bad at business. I love all of the characters that I've talked about today, both morally good and evil. I just want to illustrate the idea that an evil businessman character isn't quite as simple as we might think they are. Just because someone's primary motivation is economic gain doesn't mean they're very good at it. It's fun to tear apart our villains and show the ways that their ideas, their ideologies, their worldviews fall apart. Part of what makes a villain is that they're wrong about stuff. When you apply some logic to a villain, you start to see how their master plans were destined for failure, even before the heroes began to fight. Applying this to other villains you might enjoy, I guarantee they don't make as much financial sense as the villain might want them to. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. Please, if you did, like the video, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment. Let me know what you thought. Until then, I have been Landon, this is Landon-Core, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!